Is this working? Test, test, test. Great. Hi, everyone. There are bags of potato chips coming around, and we're going to start in a couple of minutes. So if you have any bag opening to do with lots of noisy crinkling, please do that now. Thanks. All right, let's get started. Hello, everyone. I'm Amna Shah, the MLA for Surrey City Centre and your Parliamentary Secretary for Mental Health and Addictions. And I'm very pleased to be here on the unceded traditional territory of the Coast Salish peoples, including the Kwantlen, the Katzie, the Semiahmoo, the Kakite, and the Tsawwassen First Nations, and also the Kwantlen and the Quiquitlam First Nations. So I want to welcome you all here today on this beautiful sunny day. So again, thanks for coming out. Now we're very fortunate to have with us here today my good friend Premier David Eby and also our amazing Finance Minister, Minister Bailey, Brenda Bailey, and we'll hear from them in just a moment. Now, but before we do that, I just want to say that town halls like this, they're a great way for all of us to share information, share ideas, share knowledge, and to engage in a dialogue that positively impacts our communities. And as you all know, we're living in a bit of a turbulent time. And here in Surrey, actually, we're almost at the forefront of some of those things because we share a border with a neighbor whom we're having some of these, issues with. But then again, Surrey is also home to one of the largest populations in this province. And I don't have to probably tell anybody here, but we are likely to pass Vancouver in population and size in this decade to become the largest city in the province. And we currently have 700,000 people here in Surrey this year, and we're actually projected from many places all across the world, and that includes Europe, China, India, you name any country on the planet. We probably have somebody that lives in Surrey who is a contributing member of our community, and proudly so. Now, many of the families that come to Surrey have actually chosen Surrey because it's Surrey. And they lay down their roots here, they invest in our community, they start businesses here, much like many of you. And regardless of what your business is, whether it's an accounting firm, whether it's a small business like a small restaurant or a small convenience store, your business matters. It matters to us, it matters to our community. And that's why conversations like the one that we're going to have today are so crucial to ensuring your success and the success of our community. And so with that, I'd like to now welcome Premier David Eby to share some thoughts about the discussion that we're going to have today.
Thanks, Amna. Thanks for joining us. It's great to see you. It's good to see everybody. Amna, we're so proud to have her on the team. An amazing new Surrey MLA. And just was 2 days ago, yesterday, 2 days ago. Time is crazy right now. We had the Muslim community in Victoria come together to celebrate Ramadan iftar in the legislature building, and Amna was key to organizing that. Just a really wonderful example of how she's bringing together community members. So glad you're part of the team. Thanks, Amna. Absolutely. Also, I see in the front row, we've got some proud Surrey MLAs here. I see Gary Begg, the Public Safety Minister and Solicitor General, is here. He always gets an extra cheer because we're so glad that Gary's here and joined us. Jessie Sunner is here. She's one of our new MLAs as well, working hard for the people of Surrey and delivering every single day. And then Jagrup Brar, our Minister of Mines, is here as well. Actually, I see Trevor Halford has joined us, another MLA from another party, but always welcome. The city of Surrey, I think, is maybe the one area that both the Conservatives and the NDP can agree on. It needs to be a priority for the provincial government, given the growth that's happening here and how important it is. And I am proud that we're sitting in the lobby of SFU, where the first class of medical students will be attending in September of 2026. Surrey homegrown doctors, medical professionals, helping respond to the challenges in our healthcare system and committing to deliver that frontline care for people. You can't see it if you're watching remotely, but outside the windows there's a SkyTrain station, and the Surrey Langley SkyTrain station is well on its way. It's going to be moving people across the region. On the way out to Langley, of course, you're going to hit Cloverdale on the way, where a new hospital is under construction, a second emergency room for the city of Surrey, making sure we're responding to the growth and supporting people with the services they need. There is a lot going on here in Surrey. Exciting. The challenge that we face is the time that we're in right now is wild. And it's particularly significant for Surrey. The president's actions, Trump's actions, his threats to our economy cut particularly here in Surrey. 20% of Surrey's businesses have some kind of tie with the United States. Despite the name, it's a steel manufacturing firm here in Surrey, and the steel tariffs Hawaii, Alaska is going to go up because of these tariffs. And that's just one example of the impact on Surrey businesses. And I know for all of us that have friends be the 51st state. And we're responding in a way that will ensure that we're stronger going forward. Just a few examples of how we're doing that. First of all, we're we took all the American alcohol off the shelf. And the head of Jack Daniels, absolutely. The head of Jack Daniels said this is way worse than a tariff for us because we can't even sell our products right now in Canada. The Bourbon Marketing Board out of is no longer partnering with Tesla to support the people using Tesla chargers or power walls through our Clean BC program. We're also growing our economy. We've identified 18 major projects across the province that we're speeding up to get across the line, representing 8,000 jobs, representing $20 billion in investment. These are big projects, mines, clean energy projects, and because we have to ensure that, especially in challenges, there is nowhere else to face down these challenges, and the whole world is facing these threats. Just this week it was Ireland. Before that it was the EU and Canada and Ukraine and on and on and on. But because we're in British Columbia, we have the whole world needs. We've got the energy supply that is first under the but what about the climate? What are we going to do to make sure that we're responding to the threat of climate change? We're going to continue to make sure that big polluters pay. And it's not because we want to tax these industries. It's because we want them to adopt the technologies to reduce the carbon pollution that's changing our atmosphere, that's causing forest fires, and we've had good success with doing that. We're going to continue to push on that, and we're going to continue to support British Columbians in reducing our own emissions with investments in transit and supporting them in adopting technologies that reduce pollution. This is crucially important work. You know, in this time when we face so many huge challenges, it's crucial that we stick together. I said, you know, the Americans are huge, and the famous comparison is Pierre Elliott Trudeau called the Americans and said, living beside the Americans. Canadian flags everywhere, the sense of patriotism that's going on right now, the Buy Canadian efforts that everybody's making, checking all the labels on the products at the grocery store. It's so inspiring to talk to people who make food products in British Columbia right now because they're saying we're having to add extra shifts. We're seeing our products can't stay on the shelves. The grocery stores are reaching out to suppliers saying, we want to have your products on the shelf. Winset Farms that produces the giant greenhouses that produce produce. They signed an exclusive deal with Save-On to ensure that products that used to be imported from the States are going to come from BC greenhouses year-round now. This is the kind of thing that's happening right now. It's really exciting. Excited to be here with you in this moment where we're going to stand together, where we're going to make sure not only that we survive these tariffs, not only that we support businesses and people who are affected by these tariffs, but that we come out the other side even stronger than we went into it, with more trading partners, with better growth, with a stronger foundation for our economy. Why I'm so glad we're doing this town hall, and why I'm so glad you're here, and why I'm so proud of all British Columbians and Canadians for standing together in this moment. Thank you for joining us. I'm going to pass it over to Minister Brenda Bailey, the Minister of Finance, and then we'll open it up for questions. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Premier. Thank you, everyone, for being here. I'm going to bend your ear for a little bit to talk to you about the budget, but I promise not to go on too long. I don't want anyone to take a nap. I also just want to recognize the folks from SFU. I see many of you here in the room. Thank you very much for hosting us in this beautiful new building, and congratulations. Also see some friends from the BC and India Business Council who have hosted me before. I see some of you in the audience. Very nice to see you again, and thank you very much for being here. So Budget 2025. Budget 2025. What a time to write a budget. What a time to write a budget. You can't make this stuff up. We delivered our budget on the very same day that tariffs were coming down. It was quite an extraordinary time in which to try and predict the behavior of our economy. This is a very measured budget. You don't see large movement in this budget for services that people so deeply rely on, or towards large spending envelopes. This is a budget that keeps going on the commitments that are so important to British Columbians. We keep going on our commitments in housing, for example. It's such an important aspect of making things more affordable for people. We keep going on our commitments for healthcare, more than $4.2 billion over the 3-year fiscal plan. We keep going on our investments into safety to make sure our streets are safe and people are taken care of. We keep going. And we keep going with the investments that we're making that are so important to people who rely on social services from us. But this isn't a budget that adds a lot. No one is popping champagne bottles, because it's time that we're also very careful with spending during this time of great economic uncertainty. So you see us doing two things at once: protecting the services that matter so much to the people of British Columbia, to the people of Surrey, and also looking how can we be careful with spending and start to move towards a balanced budget again. And this is a very important directive for us. We're going to do it over time in successive budgets. There are many business people in the room. You understand how important this is. That's the work that we're doing. So despite the pressures you see, you also see us identifying $1.5 billion in savings coming back to us from us taking a very focused look at our spending and bringing in administrative costs. We're also doing program reviews to really make sure that any of the expenses that we have done in the last 7 years that we've been building out systems for people, to make sure they've all landed the way that they should. And if they haven't, or if there are things that are related, for example, to COVID spending, bringing them back into the public coffer to make sure that we can protect the core services as we're in these economic uncertain times. So that's the approach that we took. I do want to mention that there's some very good supports in particular towards Surrey. All of us know that Surrey is the fastest growing community in the province. And you've heard Omna say that soon it will be the largest city in British Columbia. So we remain deeply committed to ensuring that infrastructure continues to be built for Surrey. So I won't go through everything, but I'll highlight a few things for you. For example, $79 million for an 800-seat addition to Fleetwood Park Secondary, expected to be completed in 2029. Minister Barr, I've heard 192 million for prefabricated school addition projects in 16 school districts. Now, these prefab solutions are fantastic. And if you're not familiar with them, let me just describe to you that they do something really important for us. This is unlocking new technology, new types of building that we can build twice as fast for half the cost. Isn't that something? We need more of that to find savings and still deliver very high quality rooms for students. Students and teachers love these because they have washrooms included in them. They feel just like a traditional school, but they're built much more quickly and inexpensively. We know that there's been a lot of pressure on Surrey in regards to schools, and I'll share with you that since we were elected in 2017, there have been 15,000 seats for students built in the Surrey School District. Extraordinary. And 34 new or expanded schools. You'll see funding in the budget specifically in regards to healthcare in Surrey, something that we know we need to continue the work that we're doing on. 2.8 billion for the Surrey Hospital and BC Cancer Centre, 97 million for cardiac and kidney care and interventional radiology suite at Surrey Memorial Hospital. 15.5 billion in capital funding for healthcare facilities across all of British Columbia. I'll mention also that we continue the work to support people who are struggling with homelessness, who are struggling with addictions, and this terrible curse that is the fentanyl crisis. $90 million for Heart and Hearth to get people out of encampments and safely into housing. We're also introducing something that the business community, particularly the small business community, has asked us for, which is a specific funding to support the challenge that is shoplifting and vandalism that many people experience. There's $235 million for community safety and policing within this budget. Some of that will be geared towards this new pilot program that we'll be doing. I also want to share, we've doubled the number of seats in terms of new police recruit training at the Justice Institute of British Columbia. We're making major investments in transportation networks to help Surrey's economy. Budget 2025 includes $4.4 billion for the Surrey Langley SkyTrain project to continue in these communities. The project will create 19,000 direct jobs and 14,000 indirect. Building on investments that have already been made, like the new Tatatlu Elementary School opened just last month, 655 seats. Many other things I could tell you about, but I know that the most interesting part of these events, in addition to getting hard bite potato chips, is that you have. So in conclusion, I will just say that there's a lot in this budget for Surrey. We know that Surrey needs the infrastructure to continue to support the people of Surrey, and that's the work we're doing. Thanks very much for hearing me out.
Great. Thank you so much, Premier Eby and Minister Bailey. I do just want to share, I've been hearing a lot from constituents, and despite the unprecedented time that we're in, many have communicated to me that they feel like you have their back. And they're very much so appreciative, and we have your back right in return. And I think all of us here value each other so much, regardless of which sector you're from. And again, that's why we're having this conversation here today. So we're going to jump right into questions. And thank you to all who have submitted their questions in advance. I'm going to read through some of them as requested by the individual who submitted the question, but I will, of course, give you the opportunity again in the event that you've changed your mind and you'd like to ask your question yourself. Now, when you are asking a question or making some comments, please be brief so that we can hear from as many people as possible. And to get us started, I'd like to ask Kirk Hominick from Hard Bite Chips from right here in Surrey to start us off and share his thoughts.
Thank you. Premier Eby, thank you very much for your leadership on the U.S. trade situation that we're dealing with. Yourself and the government, we really appreciate you having our back. So I'm the president of Naturally Homegrown Foods. We're the makers of Hard Bite. Everybody's got some, your new favorite snack food. Appreciate all of the support. I've got a couple of brand names too. You mentioned Jack Daniels. If you guys wanted to wipe off a couple of other brands off a shelf in grocery stores, it would be appreciated. I know you can't, but for our company, I think it's a very interesting situation. We're a growth company based here in Surrey, very proudly, and we employ over 100 people here locally, and we've scaled reasonably well over the last number of years. This tariff is a real crossroads for us, and there's two things I think I'd like to acknowledge, and maybe turn it over to yourselves for comments or suggestions back. One, I think you guys touched on it, it's food affordability and buying local. One of the things that concerns us within the food industry locally here in British Columbia as well too is the reciprocal tariffs that Canada has discussed may be punitive in a way to certain local companies, in that some inputs that we can't source within Canada that have to come from the US will be tariffed. But meanwhile, some of our competitive products that are on shelf next to us will have freedom to operate. Finding a way to remain competitive as a local company is very important. I'm aware of Buy BC as another very important vehicle here with our food ecosystem, so that's great. And then the other thing I'd like to acknowledge and get your feedback on is some of our companies are making significant investments in expanding and trying to contribute to the economy further. Some of the reciprocal tariffs will actually be punitive to us, adding, in our case, production infrastructure. We have a plan to add about $1.5 million in the next 6 to 8 months on production equipment. And we're obviously looking for ways to ensure that we can competitively do so and add to the local economy. So with that, thank you.
Yeah, thanks very much, Kurt. Please, Hard Bite chips. Thanks for the chips, man. That's fantastic. Those chips are great, by the way. I don't know if many of you have discreetly not opened your bags because you don't want to be that guy crunching away in the middle of the questions, but they are wonderful. And in fact, this company has done an amazing job. You and your team have done an amazing job reaching internationally with this product. So they are internationally popular. So fortunate that you're located here in Surrey. Your question is so important because it really goes to the heart of this trade fight. Trump is saying, I'm going to put a 25% tariff on everything that goes from Canada into the United States, which is really a 25% tax on anything that an American wants to buy that comes from Canada. And there are some things that you can only get from Canada if you live in the United States. There's some things that you'll recognize the name of, like aluminum, but there are some things that might not sound as familiar, like germanium. And what the Americans are saying is, we want to pay more and have costs go up for Americans, and that's our strategy here. And it doesn't make any sense, because it's not like they can suddenly source aluminum from somewhere else in the United States instead of buying Canadian aluminum. They got to buy it from us. And so all of those companies that use aluminum inputs, they're seeing their costs go up. They're not expanding. They're putting things on hold. And they're competing with companies around the world that don't have to pay that tariff, that are able to access Canadian aluminum or other aluminum, and they don't have to pay that additional tariff. And so what I just got asked about is, Canada is retaliating, and we're saying, we're going to put tariffs on some things that come from the United States into Canada, which means that we're going to pay more for those products here in Canada. And so what we're saying to the federal government is, choose the things that are easily substitutable for Canadians. Don't choose things that we can only get from the United States. That's what the Americans are doing. It seems really dumb. Choose things where there's a Canadian alternative, where instead of buying whatever can you give me an American chip that we should be careful about? Kettle. Don't buy if you're going to do this, tariff kettle potato chips coming in so that they're more expensive. And then people are going to reach for the hard bite chips that are produced right here in Surrey instead. Choose something where there's an easy substitute for people. And everyone at home, choose the hard bite chips. Take a pass on the kettle right now. I'm sure they're great people. I'm sure they're fine Americans, but right now we're buying Canadian. So that's our message to the federal government. And they're saying, okay, well, we've done those. We've done the bourbon, we've done the Harley-Davidson motorcycles, we've done these other things. In our next tranche, there's going to be other things. There's going to be pieces of equipment. There's going to be inputs for Canadian industry. There might be some impacts. And so they've created a process where they can receive requests from Canadian businesses. Can you give us an exemption from this tariff? We can't find it anywhere else. If we have to pay it, it's going to make us uncompetitive compared to the kettle chips. They don't have to pay it. And so we're supporting businesses in making application for those exemptions from the federal government. But overall, we're really discouraging the federal government from choosing those categories of things where there's not a ready Canadian substitute. So happy to support your business and any other businesses in accessing that federal program, which may be a full rebate of the tariffs that they collect from you, maybe an exemption, but they've put that in place, and we can support businesses in accessing that. The last piece is we want businesses like Hardbite to invest more in buying more equipment, in producing more, in meeting the demand, and we know that there are barriers to do that. And so the Minister of Finance is working with business, and so are we around a table responding to the tariffs. How can we support you in bringing on that additional capital to buy that equipment, to add to your ability to produce here in British Columbia, to make you more competitive, to support employment here in British Columbia? And Brenda, I don't know if you want to talk about some of that work you're doing.
Yeah, thank you very much, Premier. Nice to see you again. I think the last time that I saw you, you were winning an export award for the great work at Hardbite. So lovely to see you again. So the Premier just made reference to a really important trade and economic security committee that we have struck. It's a really active committee, and it's chaired by business leaders around the province, and a number of different industries are represented, as well as Labour and First Nations representatives, and the work happening at that table is very significant. I'll share with you, for example, that when we asked these leaders to go back and consult with the businesses that they represent for recommendations that government can look at to support businesses like yours, and we got 200 recommendations back. Very significant. There's also been 100 recommendations that have been motivated by government. And so we've taken those and distributed them to the ministries responsible for review and looking at how we can get this moving quickly. We're also, of course, moving forward with legislation that allows us to move more quickly to support businesses. So this is work that's ongoing. It's deeply important, and we'll make sure we exchange communication afterwards, Kirk, so that we can get your voice included. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Kirk. And your tikka masala chips are actually a staple in my house, so I appreciate that recipe. All right, so we'll get started with our first question, and that is from Jashandeep and Arsha from Solid State. I think we have a mic that's going to come around to you, just right there in the front. Yeah, there you go.
Hi, I'm Jeshan. I'm co-director at Solid State Community Industries. We in Surrey are supporting cooperative development in racialized and immigrant communities. Currently, we have about 30 co-ops and 250 worker owners within that network. And we are really looking closely at what the province is doing in response to these tariffs, and are curious to know how a partnering community organization such as Solid State can support that response through the economic resiliency that cooperatives bring.
Thanks, great question. Thanks for the t-shirt, by the way. I'm very excited about that. It's very thoughtful, and thanks for the amazing work that you do at Solid State. One of the reasons why, and the NDP has always been enthusiastic about co-ops, one of the reasons why we really like them is that they really do place that emphasis on buying from each other, buying local, supporting local economies, and finding ways to really lift up communities by buying things from each other. And that's something that Canadians are doing right now, just as a patriotic response to what's happening. This is inherent to the co-op movement as a whole. And so there are a number of things actually that you can assist with. It depends on the scale and the size of the co-ops you're working with. But one of the things that I mentioned was we're removing trade barriers across the country for various goods. And the dominant, when people start a business, especially a home-based business, often they're producing food or they're engaging in food-based businesses, especially new arrivals. It's something that everybody understands. You can deal with language barriers, like you could just produce the food that people are excited about, and often it gets sold at farmers markets or other, like there are a lot of generalizations there, but the biggest and most challenging category of product to sell across Canada is food. And you're talking about liquor, you're talking about prepared food, you talk about every province has its own rules. They have their own testing. Let's give you one example, which is meat products. If you are producing a meat product in British Columbia, you get your approval in BC to sell it in BC. You're allowed to sell it in BC. You're not allowed to sell it in Alberta. You have to get a separate federal inspection of the same product in order to be able to sell it in other provinces. If it's good enough and it's safe enough for British Columbians, surely it's good enough and it's safe enough for Albertans, for people in Nova Scotia. These are the trade barriers that stop smaller 1-2-person businesses from accessing markets across the country. And so as we remove these barriers, things that previously were very challenging probably for some of your businesses, and it's not just food, it's in a whole array of different products, safety products, and anything related to agriculture, alcohol, you name it, has been very hard to sell across the country. You can support those businesses that you're working with in understanding as these rules change, and they will change very quickly. Every single province right now is working on something called mutual recognition. We just introduced the law in the legislature here in BC to say if it's good enough under your regulations, it's good enough under our regulations. We mutually recognize each other's as good enough, and you can sell right through. To help those local businesses understand the market has changed, you can open your website up to sell right across Canada. When you do your little Instagram ad and you say, hey, I've got this amazing product, you can sell it to somebody in Newfoundland as easily as you can to somebody in Vancouver. And so this is the goal, this is where we're going to, and that communication piece, especially to new arrivals who all the rules and it's in a language that it's not their first language, and all the challenges, all of that, as long as they satisfy the BC requirements, will be good enough for across Canada. That's where we're headed to, and it's very exciting. And that kind of knowledge translation to help businesses grow and develop is going to be really crucial. So thanks for your work. It's very exciting.
Great, thank you. Now our next question is from R. Smith, and I'll read it out. So Premier and Minister Bailey, R. Smith says, I understand that BC Ferries uses Starlink services and does not have plans to cancel this contract as a Crown Corp. Shouldn't BC Ferries adhere to efforts to protect Canadian sovereignty and fight the punitive tariffs coming from Trump and Musk?
Yes, they should. And thanks for the question. Two pieces. One is we've issued a letter to every Crown Corporation, every company that's owned by the provincial government. This is BC Hydro, it's ICBC, all of these Crown Corporations as well as health authorities, and said, we want you to buy, we want you to buy anything except American products right now. But we want you to try to buy BC and Canadian first when you're buying products. And we also want you to look at your procurement. When you go out to the market and you say, we're looking for 1 million disposable sets of cutlery. That when you're going out to procurement and you're offering contracts like that, that you're preferring, when bids come in, you're preferring to buy from Canadian first. So for the small purchases, for the big purchases, that you're buying Canadian first. BC Ferries is a little bit further out of our control because of the historic structure of that Crown Corporation than other Crown Corporations. But I certainly know that the Minister of Transportation has made it very clear to BC Ferries that our expectation is that they are also making sure to support Canadian products. And you can see in the BC Hydro announcement around Tesla that the Crown corporations are taking these directions very seriously, and as they should, as all British Columbians are. So thanks for the reminder about that. I know it's front of mind for BC Ferries because they've heard from the Minister of Transportation about this very issue.
Great. Our next question comes from John McCarthy and Pardeep Crode from the BC Cancer Foundation. If you could just put up your hand so that, there you go.
You want me to? Oh, sorry. Do you want me to stand up? Okay. Sorry, thank you. So I'm Pardeep Crode, Associate Vice President with BC Cancer Foundation, and John McCarthy, who is our past chair and now a board member with the foundation. First and foremost, I want to thank you for your continued investment in cancer care. I mean, you've invested incredibly in building 4 new cancer centers across the province, and that will, drastically increase our capacity. So thank you for doing that. My question really is around how we can support and how we can partner, right? Is around this economic uncertainty. BC Cancer Foundation is the largest funder of cancer care. And along with our hospital foundation partners, we just really want to know how can we help, help you in sort of continuing to build cancer care across the province.
Thanks for the question, and BC Cancer is such a good partner of the provincial government in 2 different directions. One is in supporting that physical infrastructure around the cancer care across the province, building that out, the actual facilities, and the other is in the research. Supporting the cutting edge research related to cancer treatment. And cancer is one of those diseases where the science is moving so quickly, and the treatments of individual cancers are very dependent on your own genetics and the genetics of the cancer cells, and it's getting really highly personalized. And as it does so, it gets, especially the brand new and very innovative treatments, they get more and more expensive, but they also get more and more effective. And this is the big challenge in our healthcare system as a whole. These innovative and amazing new treatments are very expensive in an aging population, so there's more and more people who need them. The treatments themselves are more expensive, and it all of a sudden the Minister of Finance is going, wow, we got to pay for all this stuff somehow. And so the crucial piece that the BC Cancer can help us with, and where we're going as a government on this, is we are really pushing hard to make sure we've got an amazing life sciences sector in the province. There are a number of companies, Abcelera, Stem Cell are 2 of the big ones that people might recognize their names. But it started way back with a company called Angiotech that did a stent in the hearts to keep heart arteries open. And so that kind of created a bit of a cluster of life sciences in British Columbia, and it's just grown and grown and grown. And so what we want to do is 2 things. We want to help bring down the costs of healthcare. We want to improve the efficiency of the treatments and make them more effective for people. And we also want to grow our economy, because when more people are working in the province, especially in high-paid jobs in life sciences, then we have those tax revenues that help us pay for healthcare. So it's a virtuous circle that supports itself. So at the new St. Paul site, we have a research facility that's going in there that will assist in ensuring that the treatments and the developments that are coming from our life sciences sector here in British Columbia are available to British Columbia patients first, that they're available through clinical trials, that as the breakthrough treatments are developed here, Moderna's vaccine, for example, relied on a component that was developed here with life sciences firms right here in British Columbia, that we get access to those treatments right away, that it's part of growing that sector of our economy with more employment, and that it continues providing not just care, but also growing our economy. And so I think for the Cancer Foundation, the opportunity is to work with us on that cycle to help attract and retain those firms that are doing that kind of research, commercializing that research and turning it into effective cancer therapies, and supporting us in getting those frontline therapies through clinical testing into British Columbians, so that we're building that whole ecosystem of care as well. I'm very hesitant to provide suggestions to you because you do such amazing work already. Just keep doing what you're doing. But that's an area where we're going and we're pushing into, and it's important for British Columbia to know that as well. So grateful to the Cancer Foundation for your work and your support, especially as we crack down on those on vapes, on tobacco products, nicotine products like those little flavored pouches and other things. You know, it's just the work that's happened there as well is really important. So thanks very much for your work. Thank you.
Great, thank you. So our next question is from Alex Bilgin, and I think this might be maybe fairly directed to you, Minister Bailey. And the question is, there is a significant cash flow squeeze among small businesses across British Columbia. How does the government plan to address this economic slowdown and support small businesses in overcoming these challenges?
Yeah, thank you very much. And first of all, let me just share that British Columbia, we have more small businesses in BC and in Canada than most other jurisdictions. 90% of the businesses in British Columbia are small businesses. That's extraordinary. So when we say things like small businesses are the lifeblood of our communities, we really mean it. This is a huge number of small businesses that create jobs and give back to communities, and they're so, so, so important. We've heard from small businesses of some of the challenges they've been facing with. That's why in last year's budget, we changed the employment tax for the employment health tax, the EHT, so that more small businesses don't pay it. 90% of businesses in British Columbia now do not attract that tax. We raised it from $500,000 to $1 million threshold and then graduated from $1 million to $1.1 million. That was because small businesses told us that's what they needed. So that's what we did. We know there's more work to do, though, and we're hearing from small businesses in many different ways right now. One of the things that really benefits small businesses is when we bring big events into British Columbia. We're hearing this across the board, and we've been doing a lot of this. When Taylor Swift came, for example, and we have FIFA coming, and the Junos, and, you know, we had Invictus Games. That benefits small businesses as well. And although FIFA is located in particular areas, there's plans for viewing parties all throughout the province, which really supports small businesses. And I think the very best way to support small businesses is to have people spending money in them. One of the biggest challenges is that in this time where people are feeling their budgets pinched because of the great increase from interest rates and inflation and wages, you know, rising but not quite keeping up, that affordability gap, it means that people are spending less money on things other than what they just really need. And so we need to address that. The affordability challenge plays out in small businesses. So when we're doing work on things like housing, making sure that we're bringing down the cost of rentals, that's actually supporting small businesses. And I'll share with you a really interesting study out of McGill University just a month ago that showed because of our housing policies, rent has come down by 5.7%. It's not enough, but it's going the right direction. The supports that we're putting in place to help with affordability will also help small businesses. We have more to do, but small businesses are so, so important to us.
Great, thank you, Minister. Our next question is from Scott Wheatley from the Cloverdale Chamber of Commerce. Scott, if you could just put up your hand. Oh, there you are.
Oh, yeah, thanks very much, Premier Eby and Minister Bailey. My question is, currently Whatcom County sells industrial land at a fraction of the cost of the industrial lands in British Columbia. With the tariffs, there could be motivation for a lot of businesses to relocate to the States. Does the province have any strategy to keep Canadian businesses in Canada? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Scott. One of the, it won't surprise you to hear, one of the issues raised around our tariff roundtable is the availability of industrial land in British Columbia, particularly in the Lower Mainland area. You know, it's a reality of Canada that we're all crowded up against the U.S. border, and it's a reality of the United States that they tend to be a little further south, right? Understandably so, it's warmer, I get it. But we've got the mountains, we've got the ocean, we've got the agricultural land reserve, and then we have demand for housing that's significant. Our population has grown so quickly, I don't have to tell anyone in Surrey that. And so how do we make sure that there's dedicated land available for industrial uses here? There are businesses that want to operate here, they want to expand, but they can't find the land to be able to do it. Well, there's two parts to it. One is we're currently working right now to identify ways that we can allow more food processing to take place on the agricultural land reserve. It's Dave Barrett, who created the Agricultural Land Reserve, famously said, you know, it's no good to have an agricultural land reserve if you can grow strawberries, but you can't make jam. And because his vision of the Agricultural Land Reserve was one that ensured food security for British Columbians, that we were able to produce the food that we need. And this is significant for two reasons. One is we want to do our best to keep farmland available for farmers, so that we're able to grow the food that we need. The ALR is crucially important for that. But the other is, if suddenly Trump takes some kind of action that drives up the cost of food at the border, or restricts the ability to get food across the border, or whatever it is, we need to be able to feed ourselves. We need to be able to look after ourselves. So this is a security, it's not just a food security, this is like a security issue for us as a province. And so by having food producers be able to produce more on the Agricultural Land Reserve, we think we'll be taking pressure off of industrial land generally. Many of the major tenants in industrial land in the province are food producing companies because they want to be very close to where the market is. The second is we have a significant number of industrial parks that are proposed for British Columbia. When you have an industrial park, you need plumbing, you need electricity. We will have significant advantages being here in terms of the technology available, the people available, the skills here and the resources and the cost of electricity and other advantages that we have here in British Columbia compared with Washington State, especially the northern part of Washington State. The whole intent of Trump's tariffs is to do exactly what you say, to try to get companies to relocate to the United States. The tragic part of what he's doing is he is destroying consumer confidence in the United States. He is driving the economy into recession. He's increasing costs for Americans. And it's having the exact opposite effect that even American companies right now are saying, we're not expanding, we're putting things on hold, or we're laying people off because we don't actually know what we're going to be paying for electricity or for all the inputs we need and that kind of thing. It's self-defeating, and if we work together, we can be more prosperous, and that's the message that we're delivering to the Americans. But in the meantime, our focus is on increasing the security of businesses as well as food producers here in BC so we can stand on our own 2 feet. So thanks, Scott. That was a great question.
Great, thanks very much, Scott and Premier. Our next question comes from Ginny Hasselfield from the Surrey Urban Mission. SUMS has been feeding 200 people per day for the past 15 or more years. Their funding has
Urban Mission. To try to address this, we ramped up funding quite dramatically during COVID to provide support. Urban Mission. To try to address this, we ramped up funding quite dramatically during COVID to provide support, and that to the community is crucially important, and I'm sure we'll be able to find a path forward to be able to provide that support, albeit at a lower level than the COVID period, but to provide that crucial support to people in Surrey.
Great, thank you. Our next question is from Ken Dillon, and Ken, if you'd like to ask the question yourself, you can raise your hand now. If not, I will ask. Great. So the question is, given the chaotic environment, there are opportunities for Canadians Time for government to build affordable housing with private sector collaboration. Sector collaboration.
Market has shifted quite dramatically. Interest rates went up quite quickly, and a lot of home buyers stepped back and said, well, I'm not going to buy right now, looking at what the mortgage rates are. Interest rates are coming back down now, but still the market feels very uneasy. The model of building condos, particularly in the Lower Mainland especially, and to some extent South Vancouver Island, has been through pre-sales. Sell your pre-sales to investors and use that financing to build the building, and then the investors flip the final condo to the ultimate owner. It's a model that worked to build a whole bunch of housing in British Columbia and in Ontario, and it's not working right now. People aren't buying pre-sales, and I know there's a lot of attribution of that to the flipping tax, but the same thing is happening in Ontario as well, where they don't have the flipping tax. And we did recognize that might be an issue, which is why we had the period of time for the flipping tax that could include the possibility of an investor buying at the beginning and then still selling to an ultimate user. But whatever, and we can agree or disagree about the reasons for pre-sales collapsing right now across Canada, but what it means is we need to find ways to still build housing. And the Minister of Housing is working closely with the major home builders in the province that build those significant multi-unit projects to find ways to ensure that they're able to access the capital to actually be able to build. They're seeing the same challenges that other businesses are. Global inflation driving up the cost of things, uncertainty around costs as a result of tariffs, as well as challenges around accessing labor to be able to build. And so we've taken steps like putting off changes to the building code so that there's predictability around what needs to be delivered. We're examining ways that retail investors can support the construction of purpose-built housing. We are looking at other ways of getting capital into the housing market through investors, but what we really don't want to do is go back to where we were before, where investors buy a home and turn it into a hotel room, or investors buy a home and leave it empty, where you increase the cost of housing, but you're not delivering additional housing. We want those investors to help us deliver housing. We have a model that we're launching in Vancouver, where there's two mortgages on a property. One is held by the provincial government, and one is held by the homeowner. And as a result, we're able to deliver housing at 30% below market for, I think the target is 13,000 units of housing in Vancouver. Once we establish that model, we believe that there's significant interest among private investors in holding that second mortgage, participating in the upside in the property, and also helping drive down the cost for first-time home buyers. We're really excited about rolling that model out across the province. But those are the kinds of mechanisms we're looking at to get investment and private capital to help build housing, not going back to the old days of empty homes and converting long-time rental housing into Airbnbs.
Great, thank you. And our last question comes from Amos Kambere from the Umoja Compassion Society. And Amos says, this question is personal for Umoja. We have for many years supported families using IRCC funding. And as of this month, that funding from the federal government is no more. Does the province have any plans to replace this funding so that organizations like Umoja can contribute or continue to serve and support immigrant families? The need is huge. Thank you. And I think if you could maybe even expand it a little bit more broader to the potential impact